Raltegravir falls under a class of anti-HIV drugs known as integrase inhibitors, abbreviated as IIs. To understand how raltegravir works, we first need to dive deeper into the process by which HIV incorporates itself into our DNA. Remember that the viral RNA is first converted to the double-stranded proviral DNA. The proviral DNA is then what gets directly integrated into our host cell DNA. This contaminates our cell's blueprint by adding instructions on how to make HIV. Well, how does the proviral DNA actually get into our DNA? The process of inserting the proviral DNA into our own DNA requires an enzyme known as integrase. Let's now take a closer look at how integrase inserts the proviral DNA into our own DNA. First, the integrase grabs the proviral DNA. The site where the integrase grabs the proviral DNA is known as the active site of the integrase. Then, integrase goes with its new proviral DNA friend towards the host cell DNA. Once it's arrived at the host cell DNA, integrase then cuts our host cell DNA. After cutting the DNA, integrase then inserts the proviral DNA. Finally, integrase stitches the DNA back together, which now includes the proviral DNA. The end product is a host cell DNA that now contains the proviral DNA, and thus a blueprint that now includes instructions for creating HIV. Raltegravir is an integrase inhibitor, and it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It inhibits integrase. This is how it works. The integrase will bind with the proviral DNA, forming the complex that is ready to infiltrate our host cell DNA. This is where raltegravir gets in the way and ruins our diabolical plan. Raltegravir targets and sticks to the active site of the integrase, which is also the site where the proviral DNA is connected. The binding of the active site then prevents the integrase from binding with our host cell DNA. This thus prevents the integrase from cutting our DNA, and more importantly, prevents the integrase from inserting the proviral DNA into our DNA. As a result, this protects our blueprint from being contaminated with the instructions to create HIV. Thus, raltegravir helps limit the number of cells that are getting the instructions for the rapid creation of HIV by blocking the insertion of the proviral DNA into our host cell DNA. This helps control the viral load in our body and helps prevent the rapid spread of HIV.